Good evening, everybody. Very warm welcome to the PacSci Theatre here at Pacific Science Centre. My name is Ross Fletcher. I'll be your host for the next hour and a half or so for what will be a really exciting evening in our latest Science in the City speaker series. We're going to be learning about the science of sports and entertainment with one of the brand new innovators just a couple of slap shots northwest. My directions are always awful, but somewhere over here, I believe, down the road at the site of the old Key Arena, we will be having a gleaming, brand new, world-class sports and entertainment arena for National Hockey League, world-class music events and more. Anybody excited about that? I thought so. The puck will be dropping in 2021 for the very first game for the Seattle. Nearly gave the name of the team away. Nobody knows the team name yet, honestly. We will have a Q&A later. Nobody knows the name of the team, okay. I'll backjacks that question right away. But in the next hour and a half or so, we will be hearing from some of the sharpest minds in the design and construction industry for sports arena. You'll have your chance to ask questions of our experts who are here this evening, because this is a collaboration between many, many people. And our collaboration begins this evening with three local innovators here, Pacific Science Centre, NHL Seattle, and Oak View Group. We're going to be giving you an intimate insider look at what goes on in the construction of a brand new world-class arena. We'll be bringing you talks on a bi-monthly basis, so this is just the beginning, and we couldn't be more excited to start this collaboration. So let's hear more about the partnership from a couple of the CEOs who you'll be hearing a lot more from as we go on these speaker series evenings. We're really excited to have NHL Seattle here and to hear more about this partnership in a moment. Todd Leiweke, the CEO of NHL Seattle. But first, let's hear from the CEO and President of Pacific Science Centre. Give a hand to Will Doherty.
Thank you, Ross. I've been waiting for this night for a long time. I want to welcome you and thank you all for being here. I was just thinking earlier today that Lance Lopes and I met in my office more than 2 years ago to talk about the Science Center's enthusiasm for the new arena project and for Oak View Group as the developer of that project. And I think like, wow, that went fast, 2 years. So I'm thinking 2 more years, it's going to go pretty fast, which is pretty exciting. So just a couple of notes of gratitude. First of all, I've lived in Seattle now for almost 16 years. I've been to a lot of sporting events, a lot of music events, a couple of Amazon all-hand meetings, and some other things over at the arena. And, you know, they were great, but I always thought, this city deserves better. This city deserves a great arena. So first point of gratitude, thank you to Oak View Group for coming and helping this community by building a world-class arena. And I'm looking forward to hearing about a lot of the design challenges that go into that. Second point of gratitude, I grew up in Atlanta. And when I was a kid, I loved going to Atlanta Flames games. And I saw Wayne Gretzky score 4 goals against Jim Craig in his rookie season, and that was pretty special. And then the team moved to Calgary because Atlanta wasn't strong enough support. And then in Calgary, they won a Stanley Cup. So I am grateful to Todd and the ownership group and the NHL for bringing an NHL team here. And we're not going to move it away, and we're going to win here. And then finally, I'm grateful to Todd and his team for the partnership with us at Pacific Science Center. This is just one step in what's going to be a great collaboration to serve the community. What we are all about at the Science Center is curiosity, discovery, experimentation, and critical thinking. And we seek to provide a platform for innovators where innovators can come here and share their work with the community, just like these innovators and NHL and OVG, NHL Seattle and OVG will be doing. We also aim to be a community laboratory and living room where the community can come and have conversations and collaboration and debates about issues involving science and technology that are relevant to us, like this. So this is a great example of our work as a platform for innovators and as a community laboratory and living room. And as Ross said, there's a lot more to come. You know, curiosity, discovery, experimentation, critical thinking, those are essential for science and for innovation. They're also critical to great sporting performances, great athletic performances, great music, great theater, great dance. So we're so excited about this partnership, and I'm really grateful to all of you for being here, and especially grateful to Todd.
Will's going to go into there, so I can look you in the eye and say this. We are so excited about the partnership. Right on the other side of the wall is our preview center. And we're going to bring so many of our customers and fans through there. And we're so grateful that you gave us a chance to build something that's going to represent the excellence of, and we hope by osmosis or otherwise, that everyone also comes here because the Science Center is one of our great assets. So I thank you. I also thank Mr. Chris Ackerley because he was the marriage maker. And he said, you don't need to build that preview center in some nondescript downtown building. Let's do it right here at the Science Center. So we're proud to support you. And thank you so much. We have a long journey to go. We're going to build this incredible arena. The mayor said she thinks it will be one of the best arenas in all of the world, and she's right. It ain't easy. We're taking a historic building and creating a whole new building under the roof. We're going to go down 15 feet, but we're going to create one of the most compelling arenas anywhere in the world. Why? Because we want to bring world-class events here to Seattle, and that includes a National Hockey League team. And I am so excited because on behalf of you, our fans, we want to build something incredible. And it's not just that arena, it's our Northgate Training Center, which is now in final design planning. It's going to be truly spectacular, 3 sheets of ice, the team headquarters. But part of why we're doing this is partnerships. We're so proud to be here at Seattle Center. This is where the arena belongs. And in part, we're just proud to be a part of the community. So Tom Mayer is here, and Tom runs KEXP. So we went to Tom early on and said, look, we know we're going to be a little disruptive. They do 300 live shows a year, and we talked about mitigation of sound, but then we started talking about partnership. And the more we learned about KEXP, they're absolutely world-class, one of the greatest public radio stations in the entire world. And in partnership with KEXP, they're going to handcraft a big part of our game experience, the music. So Tom's here, and when we're done, give us some ideas on what the goal song should be, okay? Because we're open for business. But I want to thank you again. I also want to call out a few friends. Jeff Baker's here. Chris Daniels is here. And my friend Art Teal's over here. So you guys are got, like, not just this room, but there's some heavy-duty media folks here, all right? So don't blow it. Have a spectacular night. Thank you for coming.
I want to make a slight correction to one thing Todd said. KEXP is not just one of the best public radio stations in the world. It is the best radio station in the world. I now want to offer you a world premiere opportunity. We've been working on a little project, the Science Center team, Todd's team, and Ross Fletcher. Been working on a little video project, and right now is its world premiere. Enjoy.
For nearly 6 decades, Pacific Science Center has been the place to ignite your curiosity and to experience discovery, experimentation, and critical thinking.
My favorite things are going to see the bugs and the butterflies. I love the laser light show. 3, 2, 1.
For years, Pacific Science Center has been a partner with the school systems around the state to bring science into the schools in a way that enlightens science education.
We serve over 1 million people every year, several 100,000 out in the community through our outreach programs, most notably Science on Wheels.
Look to your left, look to your right.
More than 85,000 of those students this year will be part of low-income families.
Yes, if we squeeze it.
We want to be a laboratory, a living room where conversations about science takes place.
We have undertaken a comprehensive program that includes deeply discounted memberships for anyone on public assistance, that provides free memberships to any child up to age 21 in the foster care system or experiencing homelessness.
Accessibility is really important for us here at the Science Center. When you work at a place where you see so many excited people and so many inspired people running around, we just want to make sure that people all over the state, from whatever backgrounds they come from, are able to enjoy that with equal access.
One of the big changes that I see in Pacific Science Center is its effort to be increasingly relevant to our innovation economy in this area. We have startups now that bring what is reality to life for people who have no idea about where all this future technology is coming from and what it's enabling.
We're just thrilled to be collaborating with NHL Seattle. It's consistent with our goal to be a platform for innovators.
And what we're hoping is that people will come here and see this preview center and be inspired, but they'll also be inspired by what's happening right next door on the other side of this wall at the Pacific Science Center.
We are really, really excited about our new evening series that will be showcasing science and technology of sports and entertainment.
You think about the game of hockey from a science standpoint. Physics play a big role in the game and geometry, and so the ability to explain our game and what we're doing through a partner who's in that business is really remarkable.
Seattle is really a wonderful place for innovation and invention, and we've really brought into the building some of the latest, coolest technologies that are going on in our community.
It was fun.
It was great.
It was crazy.
Yeah. And then he keeps growing.
Yeah, I'm like, is he gonna crush me? I was scared. I was crouching down.
This has to be amazing. Like, this is like the best feature.
I can't wait till everybody can experience it.
We have a diverse set of exhibits and experiences. It includes some really world-class offers. We have the world's largest laser dome. We have the best IMAX experience in the Northwest. We have many rich offerings that appeal to people of all ages. We have a new effort, PacSci at night. And now, with NHL Seattle here and this incredible world-class arena, we've got an opportunity to enrich experiences here in Seattle Center throughout the entire day and through the night.
The Science Center is a nonprofit. It really depends on its members and donors.
For many years, I don't think philanthropy in Pacific Science Center was necessarily something that people thought about. But your dollars fuel our progress.
Just a little taster of what you can do and see and experience here at Pacific Science Center. I've been a member here for probably 3-4 years, and every time I come, I find something different. Very privileged to help make that film, and just the idea that there is so much here and so much more, including what we're about to hear this evening. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we have 3 men critical to the project of building the brand new Seattle Center Arena. After that, we'll have probably about 30 minutes or so for you to ask your questions and be curious tonight for us, please. I'm sure you will. So without further ado, let me introduce the gentleman to my right-hand side. On the far right, we have Sean Mason. In the middle, Jeff Sorinsky. And to his left, Jeff Chong. And what about all three? Sean Mason, Vice President of CAA Icon, a world-class firm in the realm of strategic management consulting for both public and private sports arenas and plenty more besides. Sean is the project executive for the brand new Seattle Center Arena, so he oversees the design and construction of what you will see opening in a couple of years' time. Also, his task is to preserve that historic key arena roof. He's an avid sports fan. His NHL experience includes working on the construction of the Edmonton Oilers and Pittsburgh Penguins arenas. Again, Sean Mason, everybody. In the middle, Jeff Sorinsky, who's a senior principal and managing director at ME Engineers, a global mechanical and electrical engineering design firm. One of his areas of expertise is in sustainable design solutions, something you'll see plenty of in this brand new arena. He has tons and tons of experience in working on NHL, including the first LEED certified arena. Also was a part of building the MLB's first LEED certified ballpark and the first LEED CS office tower on the West Coast, which just happens to be over the 520, or if you don't want to pay the toll, over I-90 in Bellevue. Jeff Sorinsky, everybody. And our other speaker this evening is Jeff Chong. He's a Vancouver native. We'll forgive him. I mean, he could have been from Portland, I would say. An avid skater, and you still skate regularly in your hometown of Kansas, I understand. And he's lead project designer and architect for Populous, and currently the lead project designer for Seattle Center Arena. Since joining Populous around 12 or so years ago, Jeff has helped design facilities and experiences for North America's top sporting arenas, you name them, NHL, NFL, MLB, and Major League Soccer. Jeff was a designer for T-Mobile Arena recently in Las Vegas and renovated PNC Park in Pittsburgh and Centre Videotron in Quebec City. So our panel this evening just has an absolute ton of experience. We're very grateful to have them here this evening. So we'll open the floor up to them, beginning with Sean. Welcome to the stage, sir.
All right. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for coming out. Luckily for you, I'm not going to be up here for too long. These guys are the ones who really know the ins and outs of the building. But I have been fortunate to have been involved in this project now for almost 2 years, going all the way back to the RFP process that was released by the city and was responded to by both Oakview Group and AEG. So there is a good bit of history here that I'll happily share with you. Certainly during the question and answer session, I'll happily answer any questions that these guys might want to deflect. But really the purpose of me being here is really kind of to set the stage and give a little bit of context on this building and really the undertaking that it is. It really, as Todd often says, is not for the faint of heart. This building has been studied many, many, many times because it, of course, is a landmark building. It is very important to the Seattle Center campus, to the neighborhood, to the city of Seattle, and to the entire Pacific Northwest. It has such a great history, and we believe, of course, it has an amazing future ahead of it. So really the task that we've all been faced with is blending the two of those, is combining this landmarked building with a modern, brand new arena. Throughout the discussion tonight, please, we ask that you do not refer to this as a renovation because it's not. We are keeping the roof and we are going to replace the glass that's currently on the exterior of the building, but we are building a brand new arena within the confines of this building. Within the confines of the roof and the existing cladding, and it is no small feat. As you can imagine, there are a lot of entities who really care about how we do that and how we maintain that history because it is so important. So it's been a major, major task for us to ensure that we're honoring the past while also focusing on the future. And Todd mentioned that we are going to be digging down 15 feet. And not only are we going down, but we are going out in all 4 directions in order to expand the volume of this building to become a world-class arena and to actually double the size. I think the latest numbers have come in. It's currently 411,000 square feet, and it's going to grow to over 800,000 square feet. And that does not even include the parking garage below grade. So it's really amazing. And what's really amazing, too, is the fact that this is all being hidden below grade. I liken it to an iceberg in a lot of ways, in that we are keeping that visible piece that you see today. We are adding to it with an atrium that Jeff will talk more about, that they've done an amazing job of creating. It's absolutely critical to the function of the building, but it's transparent in many ways, which is what helped us get through the process with the Landmarks Board and with the National Park Service and also with the Seattle Design Commission. We need it from a functional standpoint, but we also didn't want to detract from the existing landmark status of the building. And through this design that Jeff will expand upon, we are actually pulling a full 180-degree turn on this building. Right now, what is the back door of the building, the loading dock, is actually going to become a brand new entrance to the building. And there really is no back door on this arena. It's really fascinating. So, really, again, from start to finish, this building has been a challenge, and it's been an exciting challenge. Really, there's not a day that goes by that somebody on our team doesn't say, man, can anything on this project be easy? And it really is not easy. But of course, that's what we all strive for. We all love the challenge. We all love thinking through how to actually pull this off. And again, I mentioned how many people have studied it before, and they've tried to analyze: can you rotate the ice surface 45 degrees to the axis of the existing building and somehow cram the seats in there? You can't. And going back a few years, Todd's brother Tim Lywicki became curious. He wanted to know, how could we really study this building? So he pulled aside my boss, Tim Romani, and Jeff's boss, Chris Carver, who collectively between the three of them have done more arenas than anybody in the world. And they figured it out. They figured out in order to make this happen, you have to dig down, you have to dig out, and you have to have the right people who are willing to take on that risk to figure it out and actually implement it. And we thankfully have put that team together. And I actually am supposed to be showing more slides here. So I'll leave you with this for a while, so you can just stare at us, in both real life and in 2D. You've heard enough about us so far, but really I'm here to introduce the team. And with beyond Jeff and myself, we of course have huge teams across the board. We have a partner in Mortensen, who is our construction manager, who has been brought on to really take on the risk of building this building as a partner with Oakview Group. And there's a ton of risk. I mean, there's no hiding that this is a major undertaking, the likes of which have never really been done before. So starting at the very top, though, as I mentioned earlier, it started with Tim Lywicki's idea, his vision. He turned to Tim Romani and Chris Carver and said, let's figure this out. Collectively, we all gathered together and figured out how to do it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that on the private side, we've been doing all of this work. But there's really this partnership with the city of Seattle and everybody within the city of Seattle, whether it be Seattle Center, the Seattle Design Commission, the Landmarks Board, SDCI, SDOT, all the way throughout the city. We have become a team, and it's become an amazing partnership, the likes of which in my short career I've never seen. I did see a great partnership in Edmonton where both sides were putting a bunch of equity into it, and they did work well together on that front. But in this case, this is 100% privately financed. So not only is the arena itself and all the construction and all the risk that goes with it 100% privately financed, but then there's also even more on top of that that's being given back to the community to the tune of $70 million in community contributions. And those are over and above even the practice facility that Todd mentioned earlier. So there's $40 million going to transportation costs. There's $3.5 million being given to the arts. There's $10 million that has been pledged to youth care. And on and on and on from there. There have just been many initiatives because from the get-go, we realized that our team could not just be Oakview Group and those of us who report directly to them. It has to be Oakview Group, the city, and everybody underneath those entities. So not just the actual pieces of the city, but the actual people and the neighborhoods that make up this great city. And we went through the entire environmental impact statement process and got to meet, I swear, the entire city of Seattle in the process. And we were proud to say that we had no appeals. So we were able to get through that because of great cooperation, and we look forward to continuing to cooperate. On a more granular level, if I can advance here, again, just talking about the project team, that was just an overall snippet of just a handful of the players. Whenever Populous then branched out and said, okay, how are we actually going to make this happen? It has to be a blend of our national expertise and also local expertise. So within Populous and their entire team, we of course have Jeff and the team from ME Engineers that he leads and their extensive wealth of knowledge of arenas and green buildings throughout the world. There's Idibri, the audiovisual consultant out of Texas. There is the food service consultant, S2O, code and life safety consultant, HAL Engineers. Thornton Tomasetti, who has done more arenas than anybody else. They are the structural engineer. And then, of course, as I mentioned, locally too, the importance of having that local touch, because nobody knows Seattle better than the people who actually live here. So DLR Group, Swift Company, DCI engineers, and on and on and on. The number of consultants would actually not fit on one screen if we were to put everybody up here that is involved with this project and who will be involved. But it's an important team, and it might sound corny, but I draw a lot of parallels between our nerdy team and the actual hockey team eventually. So it's what you know, there are a lot of parallels, and we're very excited to talk about the science side of all of this. And I'll stop rambling now, but I will give a little bit of a tease too. I talk about the risk associated with this project, and these guys are going to talk about the thought that went into the design of this building, but also building it, of course, is such a challenge. While we're suspending that roof in midair, there will be a point within the next year where that roof and those landmark buttresses and columns will literally be suspended in midair, and we will be digging underneath them. They will be temporarily supported, and we will be building back up to reconnect permanent foundations to that roof. It's like building a ship in a bottle in a lot of ways, and it's really going to be something, and we're excited to tell you more about that in future sessions, along with, I know Ross is going to talk later on about other ideas that you guys might have for future presentations, so we look forward to that. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jeff Chong with Populous.
Wow, honored to be here and to see so many smiling faces in the crowd, a lot of hockey logos, hockey sweaters, some familiar faces from other community events. So yeah, really honored to be here to share a little bit about the arena project that's going on across the street. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come listen and learn about what we're doing. To start, I'll say, Todd mentioned something that just kind of struck a chord with me, and I've heard it many times before, but it struck a chord with me tonight. He said, this facility is obviously going to host world-class events, and it's just interesting to me to think about how it all started before my lifetime. But in 1962, this arena hosted the World's Fair. So it was a world stage when it first showed up here in Seattle. We can't wait to turn it into the world stage once again. So let's see, let me advance to the next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do to start is really just kind of talk you through some of the evolution of the design process. Like Sean mentioned, this project has been in the works for a couple of years already, and it has flown by. And, so right around the first of the year in 2017, the city of Seattle issued an RFP for the redevelopment of the arena. And I'm not going to go into all the details of this RFP because it's quite extensive, but I will highlight a couple of the primary goals that you'll see on the screen as well. Of course, the world-class arena for music, entertainment, sports, the NHL, the NBA, and to design and operate the arena to really enhance the connection to the uptown neighborhood, integrate with the vibrancy of Seattle Center, and to align with the Seattle Center master plans. This building uniquely is part of a campus, and not a lot of the arenas that we do, professional arenas that we do, have that type of scenario. So it really does need to respond to both the urban context, the neighborhood context, the campus that it lives on. So that's been a real important part of our design. So that's where our job began, and our first step was to essentially create a framework of design principles or design goals for the building, much like the goals that were set out for the RFP. So we drew from several influences, our expertise, our collective expertise on NHL and NBA arenas and sports facilities in general, and the historic arena itself, dating back to 1962, like I mentioned. And so here's what we came up with. 3 principles: revitalizing a landmark. And what does that mean? So that means reactivating the building for year-round use, filling the event calendar with all sorts of sports and entertainment for the people of Seattle, and then really thinking about the long-term viability of the venue for decades to come. The second kind of design principle was a no compromise design. Again, we're having to work around an existing roof, which is a huge challenge, like Sean mentioned. But it can't be we can't compromise on what this building should offer the community and the sports and entertainment industry. So it needs to be efficient, flexible, world-class, above and beyond what the latest and greatest arenas have out there today. So the challenge of working around a historic roof, we're going to elevate it to the next level regardless. And then the third piece, kind of a respectful transformation. Again, the historic landmark that this building is such a unique and amazing design challenge that we've been faced with over the last couple of years. And we want to do everything to make sure that our new design is respectful to that 1962 historic landmark. So this next slide essentially is a bit of an evolution diagram, and I hope this is informative to you in the audience. In 1962, essentially it was a flat floor pavilion, glass on four sides, creating the exterior facades, and then that iconic roof kind of hovering above. And you entered, you walked up across the plazas, you entered right at plaza level into the sides of the building, and then they had the exhibits displayed within. And then in 1995, with the renovation for the Sonics, they essentially, had a similar concept of digging down further into the site. And I will mention there are a couple other transformations that I'm sure some of you in the room are aware of that happened between 1962 and 1995. But we've kind of hit some of the major ones here. So in 1995, they dug the event floor further into the ground. They created those large kind of half circle shaped series of stairwells, depressed stairwells on the east and the west plazas that is the way that you currently enter the building. Introduced the suite level, lower bowl, upper bowl. And like Sean mentioned, that equated to about 411,000 square feet of program space. I think the amazing feat that Sean also touched on was we're pretty much doubling that, and it's happening below the surface. So the last diagram, the bottom diagram, 2021 renovation, we're expanding further down, digging further down 15 feet, like Todd mentioned, and we're also expanding out on all four sides. The footprint's getting larger at multiple levels. And I think the really interesting thing to touch on here is, I might point it out here with the laser, but look at the relationship to the building as it relates to the plazas. Back in 1962, the plazas came right up to the edges of the building. And one of the real design goals that we kind of strive to achieve was reestablishing that condition of walking up to the building and entering right at that plaza level. So again, it goes back to that third design principle of revitalizing the landmark, right? We wanted to, wherever possible, make some design decisions that would restore the historic kind of quality and the original design intent of Paul Theory's Coliseum. So I think that's kind of neat. You'll be standing on the east and the west plazas around this new arena. Granted, you'll have occupied space beneath you, which isn't the case today. But otherwise, it's not going to look significantly different kind of from some of the exterior vistas and vantage points. And so staying kind of at the RFP phase, this was kind of the site plan that we developed as part of our proposal. And you'll notice that we also added the atrium component. The laser's kind of gone dead. There it is. So we've added the atrium component like Sean mentioned. And we chose to locate that on the south side of the arena. We've kind of rotated the plan on you, so north is to the left. But we chose to take advantage of that kind of newfound space that Sean also discussed. The current service end of the building where the loading dock is and the marshalling area, and turning that into kind of a new front door. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we're able to do that from a service and a load-in, load-out standpoint. But we looked at adding the new entry atrium on the south. And at the time, there was a parking program, an on-site parking program for approximately 850 cars that we were also looking to accommodate. So that was basically between the new atrium and Thomas Street. But what it did was it aimed to, create a new gateway, really a new gateway and access point into Seattle Center along Thomas Street, extending from kind of the west edge of the center out to Uptown. And so those were kind of two of the primary moves in the RFP phase. You'll notice, and I'll touch on this a little more later, but across the street, so this is the Bresci Garage where Pottery Northwest is currently. And south of that is essentially where we're locating the new truck access tunnel that's going to take you all the way down to this new event floor elevation. And the neat thing about that is there is actually quite a bit of topography along First Avenue for anyone who's walked that part of the city. I've done it several times, and the grade actually works to our advantage there. It's an uphill climb as you go north along First, and so diving down into the site, basically beneath Bresci Garage, really allows us to get down to that new lower event level elevation. So some of you may have seen this graphic before. Again, it was from the proposal phase of the project, but it essentially shows a rendering of how we're actually implementing all this new program space beneath grade. And I think what's so fascinating is I've never been to, and please raise your hand if you've been to a sports venue or arena where you enter at the upper deck. Couple, I think there's a couple, yeah. And there are a few of them, but they're few and far between. And I think what is really amazing is that we're completely changing the condition from what it is today. And yeah, you're going to enter at the upper concourse level, at the upper deck level in the new building, and then descend down to the new main concourse, the new suite level, etc. And that's essentially what's represented in this diagram here. So a lot of new program space, and even a little bit that's kind of showed in these kind of dark areas here, but there is program space essentially expanded on all four sides. Meanwhile, still celebrating the historic roof from within, that volume, that form, that shape that is so iconic and recognizable to visitors of this building. And then I think one thing that's also really was one of our major design principles was exposing some of the glazing on the north side of the building from within the seating bowl. So currently in Key Arena, you can't see the exterior from within the seating bowl space. The seating bowl itself kind of shrouds the space, it wraps the space, and you're cut off from the exterior. Now, again, going back to that idea of revitalizing the landmark, or what the condition was in 1962 when the building had four glass walls. We're pushing for one here that happens on the north end, and I think it'll be a magnificent kind of portal and connection from inside the building out to that north courtyard where Tom and KEXP and some of the other resident organizations within that north courtyard exist. So a couple other quick renderings showing the initial proposal. This was the atrium that we first came up with. This was, again, almost 2 years ago. You can see kind of the remnants of the parking garage that existed then. And then a section cut through the new south atrium. I think one of the principles at the time was to really celebrate this new internalized south foundation, or the south buttress, as we call it, that is going to be the unique one out of the four, because it will become internalized and celebrated within this new multi-story atrium, and that is held true through the design evolution to today. That south buttress is really going to be celebrated in the new entry hall, and I think it's going to be a magnificent feature. And then again, about a no compromise design. From day one, it was all about hosting world-class events, the variety of events that the city will want and love to see in this building. And so, we're always thinking and designing to not just a sport, not just a couple of sports, but the whole breadth of entertainment and sports that are out there in the industry. So design evolution, fast forward a couple years, and feel like my job is tough tonight because I have to cram 2 years of design evolution into about 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes. But there were a couple significant events that occurred after the RFP phase that I think were ultimately what drove the design evolution, or most of the changes to the design. I think first and foremost, the development team, Oakview Group, determined that the south side of the arena should be even more pedestrian focused. So they, initially we talked about it turning into a pedestrian and vehicle new gateway into Seattle Center. And I think they made a commitment that it wanted to be all about pedestrians, just like the other plazas surrounding the building on the east, the west, and the north sides. So that was one element. The second was that the arena received its official kind of historic designation by both the local Seattle Landmarks Preservation Board, as well as the national Register of Historic Places, like Sean mentioned. So those two things, became official after the initial proposal, and then we really went through we continue to go through a rigorous process of review and evaluation and approval by those landmarks entities, and they've really helped shape the design, and I think it's absolutely for the better. So one thing, I'll flip to this next image. This is a rendering from the south side of the site. Essentially, if you're standing at Thomas and Warren, looking north towards the arena, and you remember there was previously the 850 car parking garage there. Well, again, the commitment by Oakview Group to say we want to make this a pedestrian-focused side of the building entirely. They found a solution to accommodate the parking inventory elsewhere, and cut the on-site parking inventory in half. And what they were able to do there is then depress all of the parking below grade and make this a public open space instead of one focus for vehicles. So that gave us the opportunity then to establish this transparent lens into the historic building that Sean mentioned. So again, the design of the atrium that we'll touch on a little bit more later is really about maintaining views, sight lines, and celebrating that historic structure beyond it. It almost wants to disappear. It's kind of a transparent lens, transparent layer through which you can see that historic structure. So then this is kind of the current site plan, and you'll notice a few changes, I think, compared to the one that we showed previously. First off, the atrium, I'm not sure if you can tell, but it got substantially shorter in its length. It was 440 feet long in our initial proposal. Accommodated a lot of new lobby space, circulation, stairs, escalators. Again, it was kind of a circulation spine for the building because we're digging so deep down into the site that we need to move people efficiently with stairs and elevators and escalators. So it was 440 feet in length, and through our processes with the local landmarks board and the National Park Service as well, I think we all came to a consensus that the atrium structure and the architecture of it really had to be secondary in every way to the historic route. So at 440 feet, it was extending beyond the length of the original building on the east and the west sides. The dimension of the current arena from one side to the other is 360 feet. So we worked really hard to really create a more efficient design, consolidate some things in the atrium space to reduce that overall length, and in a floor plan view that you see here, make sure that atrium was no larger than the historic arena itself. There are a couple other strategies that we'll look at here in a bit that also help that atrium remain secondary to the historic route. And then, like I mentioned, the south portion of the site, really it has transformed into a green space, an open space, another plaza, another programmable area for both Oakview Group, Seattle Center, and all the events that go on in this part of the city. So I think that was a great transformation. And again, having the truck ramp across Thomas Street to the south of Bresci Garage really allowed us to open up this part of the site. And so here's a slide that I'll try and describe kind of what you're looking at. Essentially, Thomas Street is, I think you can see it right about there. And you're looking east towards the Space Needle or through the center. Here's the Bresci Garage, Puttery Northwest. Essentially, the new truck tunnel, it's going to go basically 53 feet below grade. And you're not going to see it from the arena site itself. The only access point will be south of Bresci Garage, and it will tunnel basically all the way under that structure, under Thomas Street as well, down to the new loading dock and event level that you can kind of see here in white. So I think, again, Sean mentioned this arena doesn't really have a back door like a lot of maybe urban or civic arenas do. And I think this was kind of our design solution to allow that to happen. And then here's a quick image showing the kind of the current design and the design of the atrium. Again, you may notice a little bit of design evolution there from the initial proposal renderings. Again, that idea about always making that atrium secondary in its form, its height, its scale, even its materiality, make it secondary from the historic roof. So here you can see that the materiality is very distinct. So there's always that distinction between the two. That's something that's very critical in the world of historic landmark design. Any new addition wants to be visually distinct from the historic structure. So we're doing that through materiality. You can see that the scale and the height of it is also secondary. It always maintains your view to that kind of historic roof line that is so powerful, and that will now be very visible from the southern portion of the site and beyond. And then, like I said, it's the reduction in the overall length of the atrium allows essentially the corners of the historic roof overhang to always extend out past that new atrium east and west facade. So you're always going to read those kind of prominent corners of the historic arena. So one thing I want to talk about here, there are a few other pieces to the architecture that I would say are very unique, again, because of this subterranean nature of the building. And Jeff will get into a lot more detail on how these elements operate. But, the new architecture, the visible architecture, like we've been discussing, is really limited to the atrium. The other three sides of the building are essentially refurbishment of the historic facades. We're not touching the roof. And so where's the rest of the architecture here? And what's interesting is it has basically become these 4 or 5, much smaller site buildings that serve very specific functions. And I'm going to talk to you about what those functions are from an architectural standpoint. But you can see them here. They're essentially pulled away from the building so that they don't impact, again, that historic look and feel of the building or those historic views to those facades. They're pulled out to sort of the site perimeter or the site edges. And if we do a little bit of a cutaway section, this is from the same vantage point, you'll see that they're essentially a termination point for some underground tunnels, for lack of a better term. We've nicknamed these elements the snorkels. So Jeff will tell you what the snorkels do, but I bet some of you have an idea based on that name what they do. From a circulation standpoint, everyone's been in public assembly buildings, arenas, stadiums, exit stairwells, right? Important thing. Usually you're taking a stairwell down to some point and then exiting it. Great. In our case, you might be taking a stairwell up and then across horizontally through a tunnel and then out to the side. It's been a really interesting part of the design and challenge that we've had to deal with. But effectively, if I were to almost trace a line around the seating bowl, that's kind of where the historic facade exists above. So this starts to show you the amount of expansion that's happening here below grade. And when we bring these stairwells up in the corners of the building, they're outside the original footprint. So our strategy was to push them even further out into the site so that they don't detract again from the historic landmark. So that's what that graphic is trying to show. These last few images here will be another series of kind of cutaway sections. So this is a aerial view looking at the atrium, looking to the north. And again, you'll kind of see the scale and the size of the atrium in relation to the historic roof, always secondary. Maybe I'll ask a question to the audience. There's a skylight right here. Anyone have an idea why it's shaped like that and why it's positioned right there? There you go. I think I heard it. Yeah, a lot of you guys got it right away. Yeah, it is an absolutely amazing vista up to the Space Needle. Obviously, one of Seattle's iconic landmarks as well. So from within the building and within that new atrium, there's going to be just a phenomenal connection to that local Seattle landmark through that skylight. So cutting away the section again, this shows you the amount of design work and engineering that's going on below the surface here. It's that iceberg concept that Sean mentioned. And I'll kind of highlight a couple areas here. These are essentially the plazas. So that's the East Plaza along 2nd Avenue. Here's the West Plaza, basically along 1st Avenue. And you'll notice that the building extends clearly underneath them to these perimeter buildings that I mentioned earlier that allow exit stairs and corridors to get up and out of the building. And then Jeff will tell you what they also do. And so here's just kind of another view, but really an amazing feat to dig down an additional 15 feet from where the event floor is today, expand that footprint on all 4 sides. hold that historic massive roof in place temporarily during construction while we're carving the earth out from underneath it. I think the thought of that, I can't wait to see it under construction, see photos of it. I may or may not stand down there while it's being held up above me, but it's going to be fascinating to see. And I think this is just another view to kind of show a different angle of the atrium. But I think one thing that we thought was important to do, again with the design of the atrium, was to have this more contemporary form to it. The historic building has that deep overhang, right, created by the concrete edge beam that are held up by these Y columns, as we call them, because of their form. But it has that deep overhang that creates that dark shadow line around the edges of the facility. And the new atrium really takes the opposite approach. So it has a very clean edge to it. It's very transparent. And so there's that distinction again, kind of that contrast between the two elements that we think is critical to the design. And so here's maybe a pedestrian level view of that new South Plaza. So think again about what is there today. I know there's a pathway that traverses the south side of the facility, and it has that stairwell that takes you down and then back up and from east to west. And then otherwise, I think it's a lot of the surface area of the building, the loading dock, marshalling yard, et cetera. And so, talk about a major transformation going from service side of the building to a new front door. We think it's going to be magnificent. We're very excited about it. And we're not, unfortunately, going to get into too much detail on the interior or the seating bowl today. Maybe a topic for a future talk here. But a couple of recent renderings that we pulled together that show kind of the atmosphere and the experience that will be inside the new arena. This one's looking to the south towards the atrium. And then switching to hockey mode for all the hockey fans. I think I even saw Vancouver Canucks. There we go. So, fellow Canuck. So image of a hockey setting looking to the north. Again, that kind of amazing picture window view that's going to open up towards the north courtyard, KEXP, and the resident organization spaces of Seattle Center. So with that, Jeff, I think I'm going to pass the baton to you. Thank you.
I'm doing on time. As usual, in the design process, the architect gets all the face time. The engineers bring up the rear, no problem. So systems engineering, I was asked to come up with a couple topics to discuss. Any engineers, as was mentioned, we do a lot of these arenas around the world, and we do mechanical, electrical, plumbing, technology systems, telecommunications, security, those types of things. But there's dozens and dozens of engineering teams that are part of a project like this. I think Sean mentioned the crazy number of consultants up on this team. And every one of them would be deserved to be up here and present their topics. So I'm extremely happy and honored to get invited to this. And I'm going to apologize up front. I got some head cold on Monday. I tried to sleep it off in the plane right here. My head blew up. I'm hearing like this echo of, it's very weird to be right here listening to this right now, so I'll do my best. So inside of that, I'm going to talk a little bit about mechanical. So I'm going to drill down to mechanical engineering, and I'm showing a skeleton of what we call mechanical systems. And mechanical systems in a building like this are how we move air and water around the building for comfort cooling. So what you're seeing here is a skeleton of ductwork, or you guys know sheet metal systems. So what we're doing is, we'll do calculations and heat transfer calcs to try to predict how hot it's going to get in there when you go watch this hockey game. And it's our job to put equipment in place to cool the building down. And some of the challenges that we've come up with on this project, this is the most challenging one that I've worked on. I did Phillips Arena back in the day for your Atlanta team. And it's interesting to see that not in the same light anymore, right? But I worked on Madison Square Garden, and we converted that thing with 600 events a year, staying live, and we tried to rebuild that for the Rangers team. This one, even more challenging for us. And space is at a premium, systems, cost, all that stuff comes into play. So the things that I wanted to point out, I thought you might be most interested in, how do we take this building and deal with NHL compliance, which is a challenge in any building? How do we also take this? We've talked a lot about concerts and other events are just as important for the function of this building. And what did we do? And then some common configurations of arenas that I think were extra challenging here. And Jeff kind of alluded to some of it, but those are just some of the elements. And I tried to prepare a kind of a compare and contrast type look. That's an arena that we're designing on Long Island right now for the Islanders. That's their, it's much different just building on top of empty land. A little bit, looks a little bit less complicated, doesn't it? That team will tell you that's not true, though. I should be very careful. So what is unique about NHL? So can I use this one? Okay. So NHL for dehumidification, I think this is probably pretty obvious. The arena has to have a dry, dehumidified environment. The NHL wants it cool and dry. Okay, you all live in it's not a hot climate, and we talk about humidity, but you are a wet, a damp climate. And so we have to use the system to respond to that. When I mentioned that Belmont arena, much hotter, more humid climate, you might be surprised to hear that, but humidity is relative, and it gets so much hotter there and wet in the worst months of the year for the NHL, the Stanley Cup Finals, is, it's starting to get hot and humid. So we have to pay attention to that. So what we did here, this equipment, I'm just highlighting some of the stuff we put in the arena, was very unique. It's the first time we've ever done this. We have 8 dehumidification units that do nothing but dry out the outside air. And what's in there is, we call it desiccant wheel. If you get, most things you buy nowadays, or shoes or food, you get the little packet of desiccants in there, and this is a commercial version of that. It's chemical. As the air moves through, it'll attract moisture out of the air and dry that airstream out. And then the wheel rotates to the top, and we bring another airstream in and heat the heck out of it and dry that wheel out so it can rotate back down and redo its job. So your arena, most of the ones that we do will have 3 or 4 of these in it. Yours, simply because we didn't have space to get the big monsters in. We had to come up with something new, and when we did, we're like, wow, this actually is amazing, because the amount of redundancy that you have and the ability to operate at different load levels is second to none. Okay, so we're pretty proud of how that worked out. And something else it allowed us to do is, on that, what we call the reactivation side, where you dry the wheel back out, we could use this low temperature water system, which was highly energy efficient relative to most of what we do. Okay. So now we deal with concert environments. So we've handled NHL conditions. What are we going to do in a concert environment? And here we have acoustic issues, and we want to be able to move air through the bowl. We call the bowl. This is Belmont. So look at all the volume that I have there. I can, most arenas, if you go around, not every arena, but most of them will have tucked up in the rafters, the big round sheet metal duct up there. And that's what that's doing. Here we didn't have that kind of space. So because of the iconic roof, we didn't have the volume we normally have. I'd say most arenas were up in here with our ductwork and stuff. So we came up with this strategy, but we split it. So there's, you walk in there now and there's a lot of that exposed sheet metal now, and that's all has to go for the new seating bowl. So we ended up with the split, and there's a riser back here that comes up, and we blow air across the top and we blow air this way. And again, we were fighting space constraints, but we realized is this gives us an unprecedented amount of flexibility for concert events. So what you have, what we always have a challenge is pyrotechnics. People are moving smoke on the stage, and if we don't be careful how we're feeding the bowl, we can mess that up. We can blow that smoke around. And we just need to be able to condition it at lower volumes and speeds so that people don't are impacted acoustically during the concert. So we can shut all these off individually at multiple locations around the venue. So when you do there's a half house event, which we call a half house when you kind of curtain off pieces of the seating bowl, we can actually shut that air off and actually function a lot better than we do at most arenas, honestly. It's going to be pretty special. This is a cutaway view of the same thing. So what you'll actually see in the bowl are these runouts. Okay. And now probably the biggest complication that we had, common configurations. So how does the building get air in and out? How does the building breathe? That's one of our big issues. And we've got, you're always bringing in fresh air into the buildings for ventilation, for indoor air quality, for human comfort. You're always taking the bad air out. This is T-Mobile in Vegas, one we just worked on, Jeff mentioned. So look at the roof of that thing. It's just full of equipment. This is trying to show you scale. If I was standing there, I'd be about this tall. Okay, that's a massive pieces of equipment that are on the roof. And that's what we typically do. Or we're trying to find locations along the facade. This, I'm showing you a picture, same T-Mobile again. These are louvers. There's all kinds of louvers tucked under here that we're trying to hide, but we use the facade of the building. We use it all the time. We use the roof all the time. So Jeff just says, hey, solve this problem. Here's another example. Okay. So again, we threw this in here just to highlight. Look at the and the scale too. When you walk up to this building, the roof is highly visible, and so there's just nowhere to hide our equipment. And believe me, architects want to hide our equipment. So we had some kickoff meetings, and I dug this out of our design file. This is really a result of one of the early meetings we had, where our concept became, how do we use this plaza? We have this extensive plaza. Let's come up with a way to air. We were thinking we'd integrate this with elements in the plaza. You'd have a seating area, and there'd be louvers underneath there, and air would be moving in and out. This really creative way to integrate everything. So you started to see us make notes about how we would do. Maybe air's coming in here, air's going out there, and we'd find these integrated elements. There's just too much. It got ridiculous. There was too much air coming in and out of the building. If you skateboarded here, we'd blow you over. Right? So that's where we ended up with these snorkel systems. And there's 5 shown here. One of them is actually primarily exhaust for the garage and stuff. But these elements actually became the targets. How would we get air in and out of the building? And Jeff mentioned the stairwells. Well, we decided to follow him to the edge of the building. And we built these air tunnels. Okay, so air is doing the same thing the people are to get in and out of the building. And I actually showed this. Can you run that? This animation kind of gives you a sense of the scale and then where they're integrated. We should slow that down. Okay. So those elements that Jeff's talking about, hidden in there is our points of exit and entry for air in the building. It's kind of neat. It's the way the building's going to breathe. And we're able to do that without making, big dramatic impacts on the facade, the existing facade. So proud moment with that one. Although many a sleepless nights on how to make this actually work. But look at the end result. No one would think that this was, Jeff, would you talk about this isn't what you would normally attribute?
I guess, like I mentioned, these perimeter buildings, these mechanical intake and exhaust and stairwell structures really became part of the architectural design of the building. They're detached from the building. They're integrated with other surrounding buildings. I see Tom nodding. Here is essentially an extension on the southern end of the KEXP space. So it's fully integrated into that building, and it provides both a stair exit and the mechanical intake and exhaust that Jeff is referring to. But it takes on the architecture of that corner of the site. And I think what's really unique is this building really does have 4 sides. And even though the historic facades are identical, you would argue symmetrical, the environment or the plaza spaces that they exist in are very unique on all 4 sides of the building. The relationship of the West Plaza to First Avenue and the KEXP building, the North Courtyard space and that north facade. Again, we're gonna have a picture window between the arena seating bowl and that north courtyard space, very unique. And then, on the east side, it's more the campus environment, right? You're internal to Seattle Center along 2nd Avenue, where that East Plaza is. People arriving from the monorail, et cetera, coming that way. So they're really these buildings really take on a language of their own depending on their location. And I think that was kind of a neat little design exercise for us as well.
I think the only other thing I wanted to say is, we get a lot of credit for designing buildings like this, but man, it's pretty special to be involved with you guys like Todd and Tim that have visions of building things like this, and Jeff and his boss Chris come up with these ideas, and we get to help make it work. That's what's neat about being an engineer, and these kind of actually figuring out how to make these things work. Because the day one, you're like, I don't know how we're going to do this. Yeah, but now, you know what? The next step is going to be it's going to be more difficult. I got to build it. Our job is going to be to try to do what we can to, keep the intents intact, and the contractors it's an amazing community up here that I've met lots of people that are in this in the construction industry up here, and they're going to do a great job. But that's going to be very interesting for us to watch. Hopefully, it works out perfect.
So thanks very much to Jeff and to Sean. I think the bottom line is they like a challenge, but it will be an absolutely fantastic arena when that puck drops in 2021. Well, we have a great chunk of time now for you to all ask questions, and we love to be curious at Pacific Science Center. So if you want to raise your hands and ask questions, you are very welcome to, and I'll provide microphones to all of our gentlemen here, and we'll be able to get some answers for you on whatever you may have heard in tonight's presentation. There's a lady near the back in the grey sweater who was straight up before I even said raise your hands. You're well drilled, madam. What would you like to ask our gentleman here?
I would like to know, when you've done testing into the soil, what do you expect to find that next 15, 20 feet? Is it...
For everyone who couldn't hear then, when you do testing on the soil, what do you hope to hear or find at least in the next 18, 20 feet below?
Nothing.
Next question.
No, we really, it's a good question. We've done a ton of analysis, a lot of due diligence work with a local geotechnical and environmental consultant, with historic consultants, and a lot of this was also tied to that environmental impact statement that I mentioned earlier, where we've done a lot of exploratory drilling to determine what is down there. We know that it was a neighborhood before the arena was built. We know that the parcels that this was actually built on are still broken down according to how the homes were. We know that, of course, there was the aforementioned Bressie Garage on the south part of the parcel, which is also landmarked, and that was in fact a garage. So we do believe there might be the occasional underground storage tank. We do have a plan in place called an inadvertent discovery plan that our historic consultants actually helped us establish, that has a plan in place that, heaven forbid, we have a poltergeist incident where we find something that we shouldn't, that's ancient burial ground or something. We do have a plan in place, but knock on wood, all of our exploration to date has indicated that we do have clean soil, and there's a lot of water.
It's Seattle, Sean. Come on, what do you expect? Next question, please. Yes, lady, just down the front.
Already sites and purposes you were looking to associate or to locate off of the main building? Or did that just come across immediately like, oh, we want to take it off over here, let's also make that an exit near it?
Okay, so for the benefit of everyone, if I may proceed, because my memory is awful, it's like a goldfish. You're asking about the snorkels and where you place the snorkels. Did you deliberately place them near the ticket offices, or did you have to put them just where the plans would allow, given the limited space you have?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think actually what maybe led that design evolution was more the circulation stairwells, the exit stairwells. So that was a known function from day one in our design of the building. We knew that the expanded footprint underground, when you basically created stairwells around the corners of that, they were going to pop up above the site outside the footprint of the historic arena. And like I mentioned, in our collaboration with the National Park Service and the local Seattle Landmarks Board, we came to that consensus that these elements, we know they're going to pop up around the building, and we absolutely want to pull them as far from the building as possible, just to not impact the views and the historic nature of the arena. So I think the exit stairwells led the way. And at the same time, I think is when Jeff and his team were evaluating the different strategies, he put that first sketch up there that had multiple air intake points. And I think at that point, we saw that we drew the parallel there that these can kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, I think the size of them as we were designing, and I think so, particularly the ticket office, the ticket area, that did sort of evolve. Hey, we should do something with all this stuff we're building over here. I think so. It kind of went hand in hand. I don't think that any one drove the other, but they just kind of came out together.
May I add to that quickly too?
Of course.
Sorry, and I mentioned earlier, if I may, the cooperation with the city, with Seattle Center, and with resident organizations in planning all this. We pointed to Tom earlier, Tom Merrill with KEXP. I remember about a year ago coming to you and saying, hey, we're thinking about extending the facade of the building that you're in, and Tom and his team had a different name for the snorkels, and I see some young faces in the crowd. They were big A vents. I'll leave it at that, and we've now changed them to snorkels. But it's a great example of working closely to ensure that we weren't introducing these awful elements that would be detrimental to the surroundings and all of our neighbors.
Great question. Thank you very much. Who else would like to ask one? Gentleman in the center here, yes. Just in the black jersey here. Yeah, you, sir. You're live on candid camera.
So one thing that Seattle prides itself is the environmental standards that a lot of the new buildings have, because there have been a couple buildings that have been built in the last couple of years. What about now that roof? What about anything with water recapture and as well as the salmon urban safe standards that we've put in place for a lot of our new buildings?
Okay, so a question about environmental standards. What can you do to be environmentally friendly with the arena, and also whether you can harness the power of the roof?
Yeah, I think I'll field it. I think not to dodge the question, but we have the civil there is a lot of stormwater recapture stuff, and it's site-based, and our civil engineer team would be better to speak to that. In general, I can just tell you kind of a tangent on that question. The amount of, you are correct, the amount of, say, environmental standards and energy conservation goals and carbon reduction strategies and stuff this is a community that looks at that more than any I've ever been involved in. And it's a good, and hey, and it's a challenge. It makes things very challenging. They're not always the same. They're competing goals sometimes, but everyone on this, I can't stress enough how everyone, all the entities and the authorities they've been nothing but helpful and supportive. Answers are quick. Support is helpful. And I don't think we get through a job like this if city officials and the Seattle Center groups, our are resistive at all, we don't get through it. It's been quite the opposite. So I can't speak specifically to the salmon thing, but that's how it's worked throughout the rest of the project.
It's worth noting that we're striving for LEED certification. That was one of the prerequisites. And I think it's safe to say that both of you gentlemen would prefer to not have the existing glass that has to go back from an energy standpoint. So in order to meet the LEED requirements, to meet that certification, these guys have really had to think outside the box to achieve LEED points in areas where traditionally they can rely on more energy efficient enclosures and volumes, and it really made that challenge even bigger for them.
Okay, next question. Gentleman with the cap here.
Two questions. Is there any concerns of the integrity of a 50-year-old roof being restored? And if it were to fail during construction, would we start from scratch with a different type of roof?
So, question about the roof. Who'd like to take this?
It's being filmed.
Yeah.
We should have brought structural engineers.
Well, the integrity of the existing roof is being examined and has been examined, in great depth over the last couple of years. So there is some retrofit work that needs to be done to that existing structure. So there's some reinforcing that will be done to that roof. A lot of it is tied to seismic design, obviously here in Seattle, and some elements that were maybe not tackled or taken on in the 1995 renovation. Somewhat came as a surprise to us, but that retrofit work will happen as part of this new build. But it's all kind of from within and from the underside of the roof. So again, we're not peeling off the roof; it's being retrofitted from within. So kind of at least the exterior cladding and the historic integrity from that standpoint will be maintained.
Okay. Yes, sir. In the Boston Bruins outfit. Welcome. You've come a long way this evening. Very impressive.
I was wondering, concerning the glass window over the bowl, is there any concerns there? And so do you have plans for curtains or shutters?
Excellent question.
Let's just recap that, shall we? So everyone could hear that in case you couldn't overhear. About the amount of glass and whether you've allowed for glare or any other particular issues given the amount of glass you have in the arena.
It's a great question, and probably why you don't see a lot of glass windows into seating bowls, especially in NHL buildings. You may see a few more in basketball where you have the more field house type of look and feel. But to answer your question, yeah, it's absolutely controllable. The benefit we have is it's on the north side of the building, so it is not direct light that would ever hit the ice surface. It would all be kind of diffused north light. But yeah, there's a deployable curtain that, per the operator's preference, they can draw that curtain down and control the light entering the building. Yeah, and Sean just leaned in and maybe throw a little tidbit out there on acoustics as well. One thing that we always have to design around or design within mind is hard surfaces in the seating bowl as it relates to acoustic. Basically, noise reverberating off hard surfaces. You look around this room, you can see kind of the acoustic treatment around the space. It's absorbing sound, so it's not bouncing back into the room. That north glass wall, kind of provides a very large hard surface within the space. Now, for a sporting event, that might be very desirable. Let's amp up that crowd noise as best we can and just plant that opposing goalie on that north end. Right? That'll be the intimidation kind of side of the ice. But from a music standpoint, again, that deployable curtain has an acoustic quality layer to it, so that for music events, the curtain's deployed. It's also providing, full blackout conditions as far as a light standpoint goes. But it allows the venue to really be tuned between sports and music, which I think is pretty neat.
Thank you. Sir, yes, in the middle of the screen.
If the NHL team had begun to play in 2020, I imagine that you guys would have been in a state of perpetual crunch to get the building ready. Now that you have an additional 9 months or so, are there any additional design elements that you've been able to incorporate that would not have been possible if we were trying to meet our fall?
A question about the timeline, with the original timeline now being moved by a year. Are there any extra design elements you've been able to consider?
They were considered, but nothing is cheap. So, that's, Jeff Zorinsky ended his talk talking about, how exciting it is to build it. I was about to tap him on the shoulder and say, it's far from cheap to build it that way. Although, they have been very efficient in their design given what they've been facing. But, no, these guys have really advanced the design to the point where it was 100% complete and ready for us to, deploy and get started on construction. So, it really hasn't, unfortunately, bought us any more breathing room. You may be familiar that we've actually changed construction managers in the process. So that, of course, has created a little bit of a lag in order to bring in a new construction manager and get them acclimated and rolling with the project. So on the surface, it would seem like we could take a breath, but it actually just kind of ramped things up even more to bring them up to speed and really get them rolling.
Thanks for the question. Let's move over to this other. Try not to leave you out. Madam here on the second row.
How do you guys feel about earthquakes and the construction?
How do you feel about earthquakes and the construction? What kind of a consideration is that possibility that I think, I was reading today, I don't know if this is true, only 10% of our homes in Seattle are earthquake retrofitted. So it's a crazy statistic, but do you consider earthquakes when you draw up the design of the new arena?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. And I do wish our structural engineers were here to kind of talk to maybe some of those specifics, but I absolutely can say, yeah, it is designed to seismic standards here in Seattle. And like I mentioned, the roof is being seismically retrofitted because it wasn't in its previous renovation. So, not really to get into the details of how that's done per se. That would be a question more for our structural engineers. But I can say that the building is designed to effectively move differently. If you consider the historic structure, the concrete structure that holds up the roof and the roof itself, essentially that's isolated from the rest of the new structure. So in a seismic event, they're allowed to kind of move differently. They're designed differently. They're designed with different materials, and therefore they are going to move differently in a seismic event. So there are what we call expansion joints, isolation joints that occur between kind of the new structure and the old. To kind of put it simply, that's the way it's approached.
And I think your question was also asking about during construction, right? Is that correct? Or
a question about the magnitude.
I think the safe answer is honestly as much as can be thrown its way according to what we know. Because to Jeff's point, and forgive me because I used to be a structural engineer, there are standards that we do have to design to, and this building, that structure is actually being designed twice because our engineers have designed it for this temporary condition. Good teaser for a future session, and then also for the ultimate condition too. And both of those conditions obviously have to be safe for both during construction and after. And so those would be according to all of the studies that we have as a human race today.
Thanks very much for the question. Yeah, gentleman in the glasses in the middle.
So during the presentation and looking at this picture, you talked about the evolution of the design and how the atrium has shrank significantly. It looks beautiful. One of the trade-offs you mentioned was the parking situation, and you said that you had to basically send, I think, 850 parking spots somewhere else. What is the current state of that for those of us who love Seattle, the environment, but are also pragmatic and drive the area?
So what were the challenges regarding getting everything you needed, opening up that plaza, but being mindful that people do need to drive to the arena as well?
Yeah, so good question. And I think a lot of study has been done on parking inventory. I think I mentioned the term on-site parking, but a lot of study has been done on available inventory, essentially in the district, right? There's kind of a rule of thumb we use that says, it's a comfortable distance to walk half a mile from where you park to a venue of this type for professional sports and music events. So really, we also have traffic engineers involved, another member of the team that we've talked about today, that have done those analysis and that study. It says, okay, well, here's really the overall parking inventory in the Seattle Center District area or Arena District area. One of the other garages we've taken advantage of is the one right across Thomas Street to the south, which is the First Avenue North garage that will become an event garage for the arena as well. So in perspective, it was reduced, the on-site garage was reduced by half, but overall that roughly 400 stalls, was not a significant impact to the amount of parking that was available in the area.
Thanks very much for your question.
Local urban planner Rico Kidindongo is 4 rows up on the end there. DLR group. I mentioned DLR earlier. He can answer any questions after.
We have about 3 or 4 minutes more for questions. Yes, down the front.
So you mentioned you talked about the acoustics concerts, which was brilliant. In the city, we also care a lot about acoustics, not only music but also sporting events. When visitors come to play the Storm, they find it very difficult to set free throws. And of course, we're very proud to be not one of the 2 site events at the center of Central Field. So, can you talk about what, if any, considerations have been taken into account for acoustics so we can properly rattle the lights?
Acoustics, how do you rattle the opposition?
It's a very good question, and I think maybe another potential topic of a future talk here would be the acoustic design itself. I think our engineers could talk about that for hours. I think what I can say is the venue, like I said, it really is tunable. What we design has to work both for music and for sports. So a lot of elements that we provide in the space are deployable or retractable. So we use a lot of acoustic baffling, curtaining, and a lot of it is deployable. So one thing that you may have noticed in the renderings is kind of a new state-of-the-art, what we call a rigging grid, floats above the event floor, about 95 feet above the event floor. And that's where all the concerts and the shows, attach their show sets from, right? And they suspend their sets and whatnot. Basically, that rigging grid provides us with a somewhat kind of artificial structured plane up there that allows us to install a lot of these deployable acoustic elements. So again, it's tunable so that for music, a lot of those elements will be deployed, absorb the sound. For sports, they get retracted.
Great question. Yeah, Sir the glasses, just halfway up.
So probably about 15 years ago, the Sonics Club kind of kicked around a similar concept of going below grade. I was just wondering, in designing and developing this project, if you had the opportunity to kind of study that homework and expand on that, or you guys just started from scratch?
So did you look historically at what was previously done with the work below grade at the old Key Arena, or did you start from scratch when you came to looking at redesigning it?
I think the study that I was most familiar with, and the one we looked at, was I think what Sean described. I think it was done by ACOM, and it looked at kind of a 45-degree rotation of the seating bowl and some other expansion tactics. I'm personally not familiar with the study that you're describing. So as far as analyzing it, I can't say I have. So probably no.
Gonna have to separate you two at some point. We really are. We've got time for 2 or 3 more questions, I think. Yes, there's a lady with the black hat on the NHL hat.
I'm just wondering how quickly you anticipate getting people into the arena and then out of the arena.
How quickly do you get people into the arena and then out of the arena, is the question.
Very good question. We usually use basically a standard of kind of 90 minutes gates opening before an event. And we design the amount of entry doors, entry points according to that. Now, there's some pretty complicated math formulas that we use for people flow. And of course, what we all love going into venues, security always seems to get, more and more stringent, over the years. And so that time is all factored into it. So we basically use that 90-minute time frame. And that's to get the entire population into the arena doors. One thing I will say is, from an exiting standpoint, in our buildings, there's always more exits than there are entries. So while the atrium kind of acts as a central kind of collection point, gathering point, or entry point into the facility, and then disperses people to the various levels, the atrium's able to accommodate that population over kind of that 90-minute span. In an exit scenario, event's done, everyone wants to get home, get to their cars. Basically, the building opens up in a lot more places and allows people to flow out. So there's definitely a difference between ingress and egress.
Okay, 2 more questions. Gentlemen in the middle here.
Related to that, a lot of hockey games you go to, after the intermissions, the seats are empty. And I think that part of that reason it's so hard to get in and out. How are you designing so that people can get from the concourse or whatever back to their seats?
Drilling down on how you get people not in and out of the building, but maybe before and after intermissions. How do you get the maximum number of people to come in and out of the concourses so they don't miss any of the action?
Yeah, good question as well. Maybe I'll answer it in a couple different ways. One thing that we are designing, and I forgot to touch on it in the presentation, but the main concourse of the new arena, as well as the upper concourse, will incorporate what I call an open concourse design. What that means is, again, for all of you who have gone to the current Key Arena, when you leave your seat, you essentially go through a little tunnel, and then you're out in the concourse area and you're completely kind of disconnected from the seating bowl, right? They're 2 different spaces. In the new design, and if you've been to maybe some other NHL and NBA arenas, T-Mobile Arena, the Quebec Arena that we mentioned, or PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh, some of these have this open concourse concept. Essentially what that allows you to do is that the concourse areas, the club spaces that are at the back of the lower bowl, for example, they're basically wide open to the event floor from a sightline perspective. So there's no little tunnels that you have to go through the top of each aisle. It's kind of all open. So one thing that does for us is it kind of maintains that connection between concourse area and seating bowl 4 times like intermission. I will be totally honest, intermission in hockey is a tough condition to design around, right? If you're trying to accommodate all the people and provide enough restrooms and square footage on the concourse for everyone to just be milling about, it's very challenging, especially given kind of the underground nature of the building and the constraints that we're working.
Okay, final question. I think we should go right to the back, sir.
So this might be more a function of the arena not having full tenancy right now, but today the arena kind of is a roof, and you walk around it and it's closed. With the new design and with more future tenants, will the arena be open, or will there be spaces that are open or usable throughout the day when there's not events going on?
So the question was, not just for when there are events on at the new arena, will there be spaces, open spaces that people will possibly be able to use during the day, for example?
I can't say definitively yes or no, but it's being looked at, absolutely. And an atrium is kind of that zone that we're evaluating whether it's going to be possible to have a kind of a 365-day experience. So definitely being looked at, and because of the kind of new design of the upper concourse, which is at plaza level, and the transparent connection between it and all the exterior plazas, we think it's an opportunity for sure.
Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your questions. I think you would probably agree with me that was a fascinating talk. And we have to say thank you very much indeed to all 3 of our panelists this evening: Phil Mason, Jess Orlsky, and Jeff Charles. And hopefully we have whetted your appetite. This is just the first in our regular speaker series at the intersection of science and sports and entertainment. Our next event will be on April the 23rd, when we will delve further into the remodeling of this arena. And in the meantime, we love your feedback. We are a community laboratory here at Pacific Science Centre, so tell us what you'd like to hear about in future speaker series events, and we'll do our very best to bring those people down to the floor for you. There's an email address you can write into. It's feedback@pacsci.org. PacSci, PACSCI, feedback@pacsci.org. Drop an email there, and let us know what you want to hear about next time. So again, on behalf of Pacific Science Center, NHL Seattle, and Oakview Group, thanks very much for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you on April 23rd. Please go ahead and thank you.